Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today the album I'm going to be reacting to is Croz by David Crosby. So this was a record he had put out in 2014. It came 21 years after his previous record, Thousand Roads, which I actually have on cassette, so maybe I should re-listen to that now. But David Crosby's been quite prolific in putting out music the last few years. So he put out an album in 2014, 2016, 2017, 2018, and his most recent is from this year. It's called For Free. So a couple of years ago, there was a bunch of new documentaries out about musicians. So there was Echo in the Canyon, which talked about a number of musicians, including David Crosby on the Laurel Canyon scene in the late 60s. Yoko Ono basically put out a documentary about how she and John worked together to make the Imagine album. There was a documentary about Gordon Lightfoot. There was a documentary about Leonard Cohen's relationship with the woman who inspired So Long Marianne. And there was a very personal, confessional documentary about David Crosby. And I hadn't really thought about him before, and he's a fascinating character. If the Byrds are the American Beatles, which, I don't know, there's not really an American Beatles, but they were a big American band from the 60s. It kind of feels like the relationship between David Crosby and Jim McGuinn, who changed his name to Roger McGuinn for some reason, kind of resembles the relationship between John and Paul. So Jim/Roger was just sort of seemed like the straightforwardly likable one in the group, a talented musician, whereas David Crosby is the one who really had strong creative impulses, strong feelings about social justice. I think he's definitely the more left-leaning of the two of them. I think there's a more pronounced difference between Crosby and McGuinn than there was between Leonard and McCartney. But he also had a really prickly personality, and that's alienated from him from a bunch of people over the years. And in that documentary, he talked about his pain. And David Crosby's name just felt like a musician whose name I heard dropped in singer-songwriter circles all the time. And it was only after I saw that documentary that I realized, wait a minute, I don't really know what David Crosby sounds like, because I know him from the Byrds. And in the Byrds, my understanding is that McGuinn was primarily the lead singer. When they did do songwriting, and lots of the time they were playing Bob Dylan songs or other folk songs, it was Gene Clark doing the songwriting. So David Crosby is somewhere in the band, but he's blending in. And then after the Byrds, he became involved with Crosby, Stills and Nash, later Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. And so again, it's a group singing effort. So on the one hand, he's this enormous presence in contemporary music history, but only really recently has he been emerging as a solo artist. And I was really curious to see what David Crosby, the man himself, really sounds like. So the first track on this record is called What's Broken. This song was written by Crosby's son, James Raymond, who I understand to be a jazz musician. And it's kind of funny, actually. So you have this album that's sort of marketed as David Crosby's return. It's called Croz, but, you know, it could alternatively be seen as this father-son project. It actually turns out David Crosby is James Raymond's biological father, but was not involved in raising him at all. James Raymond ended up seeking him out, and he was like, whoa, my dad is famous. And then they ended up having overlapping musical tastes, and they were able to reunite quite smoothly, and they formed a jazz band together briefly called CPR. So pretty fascinating story there. So What's Broken, it sort of strikes you with its sound right away. It's very smooth but full. There's a slightly unconventional drum rhythm going on. Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits is playing lead guitar, but he's a subtle presence. You wouldn't hear this the way, say, you hear While My Guitar Gently Weeps and say, ooh, they did something really special with the guitar. No, they just brought in an iconic, talented guitarist and had him subtly play his part. It has tastefully dramatic vocals on the chorus, and overall the lyrics are very poetic. Looking out on a buzzing city, molecules go flying by. Standing here is a very lost disciple. How could it be that angels lie? So you're kind of just getting this sad city life scene. Kind of reminds me of the cover of a Pulp Fiction science fiction book. And it seems to be about the action problem of overcoming loneliness. Who wants to see an abandoned soul? Who wants to try and open it? Who wants to know what desperate is? Who wants to buy what's broken? So it's hard to be lonely, not just because of the immediate pain of being lonely, but because you imagine it would be hard to want someone to help you. So that's what's going on with that first song. Second song is by Crosby himself. It's called Time I Have. It has a very similar musical feel, however, to What's Broken, though there's something a bit different in the texture of David Crosby's voice. I guess I had to say it feels kind of phlegmier. I wish I had a less unpleasant way to say it, but it's pleasant to listen to. And it's similar not just in musical style, but in lyrical substance. Life in the city, so densely packed, fear of each other is an accepted fact. Fear soaks into concrete just like grease. Fear is the antithesis of peace. So I'm starting to have the sense maybe David Crosby has very negative feelings about cities. And I do remember from the documentary, which I saw over 2 years ago now, that he seems to live on a farm and ride horses. So yeah, maybe cities really aren't his thing. But then, unlike the first song, he starts to bring in some of his social justice politics. I have a dream, a great man said. Another man came and shot him in the head. So the first song talks about how, no one wants to help lonely people. And this song seems to say it's not just lonely people, it's people with ideas. No one wants to help them either. Track number 3 is called Holding On to Nothing. Similarly, it has a very melancholy vibe, though there's reference in the lyrics to sunny days, so it feels slightly more of a classic singer-songwriter tune than the last two, which kind of sounded like modern jazz. And you really just hear Crosby's voice and the guitar for a while, but then you get another star soloist. It's Wynton Marsalis on the trumpet. This song is co-credited along with Crosby to a guy named Sterling Price. No idea who he is. When I tried to look him up, I found a Confederate general. So I don't know if this left-wing protest singer brought a Confederate general back from the grave and wrote a beautiful song with him. Probably not. And again, we're seeing very poetic lyrics. After holding on to nothing for a while, I glanced to see what waited there. Nothing runs faster than time at night, but time slows down every day. Track 4 is called The Clearing, and it's another tune by Crosby's son, James Raymond. It still has a kind of minor key going on, but this one feels different right off the bat than the previous tracks. We're starting to hear a bit of an evolution in the sound. It has kind of a Celtic folk tune vibe to it. And then when you start to hear some big drums, it gives it, I guess, this fantasy epic kind of feel. Nonetheless, loneliness remains a recurring theme, though the lyrics are perhaps more cryptic than even the quite poetic lyrics we've seen so far. Fear doesn't live inside the blind. Let go and step into the clearing mind and soul. And I don't know. The above feels like a call to take fear more into your life, which, I guess it's saying take risks, but it's kind of a weird messaging. Fear doesn't live inside the blind, and unless this is like a blind rights activist kind of thing, it's sort of saying if you're not experiencing the world in full, you're missing out on fear. Fear is an essential part of the human experience. Track number 5 is called Radio, and this is the first one that had a quasi-hit feel to it. Still melancholy underlying music, reminds me a bit of Roger Hornsby's That's Just the Way It Is. And the chorus goes, first you look out, look down, reach your hand into the water. And then for you to look out, look down, and pull someone out of the sea. I kind of half remember the melody there, half didn't want to risk it. It broadly is an inspirational song. You are the captain, this is the ship, you will have to decide what gets done. Then we move on to track 6, which is Slice of Time. This one is mellower than Radio, but it's also another very memorable chorus. This time you just hear the phrase images repeated again and again, so it's a hard one to forget, and it's nice catchy music below images, even as it's still melancholy catchy. There's brief lyrical flutterings between optimism and pessimism, so could mean something, or it could just mean David Crosby really liked metaphors and he wanted to write a song based on them. My teacher said, time is elastic. I wonder just what I'll find in it. So, maybe he's philosophizing about what he can do with the rest of his life. Maybe he's thinking about the physical concept of time, or maybe he just likes that image of time being elastic. Track 7 is called Set That Baggage Down. It's co-written with a popular session guitarist, Shane Fontaine. There's some old-timey oohs in the background, gives it a slight edge that feels like it could be a classic CSNY kind of tune, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. But again, generally sounds like the rest of the album, though Fontaine puts a bit more emphasis on the electric guitar than we've been hearing so far. And this song, I think, is a bit more direct in its meaning. Every girl that left you, every friend that ran, everything that broke you, bury it in the sand. So put down your emotional baggage. Track 8 is called If She Called. So this one is just voice and guitar, and it's David Crosby playing electric guitar. So when you think of stripped down songs, you tend to think of acoustic. So the fact that he's playing electric kind of gives it a cool sound. Again, kind of melancholy, beautiful, a little bit reminiscent of The Man Who Sold the World, a little bit reminiscent of Jewish spiritual folk music. And what's notable here is on the previous songs, one had to assume Crosby was writing from a confessional place. Maybe he wasn't. I guess that's just the default assumption when you hear lyrics sang in the first person that are so emotional. You have to feel they're about the singer, though. Sometimes that's unfair. Sometimes that's not true. As my guest, the poet Therese Mason-Pierre, reminded me that it's tempting to hear her poetry as personal, but she says she's always writing as a character. But anyway, the point is David Crosby is finally talking about someone else here, definitively. Below, a bus groans by and splashes a man who swears out a drunkard's curse on the whole damned world. She smiles at that and then starts to cry. Track 9 is called Dangerous Night. This one opens with piano and then moves on to looping drums. So there's a kind of constant musical feel throughout the album, but they're all the tracks trying to do slightly different things with the instruments. So the drum effects in this one sounds a bit more modern. And this one, one of the is, and this one, the lyrics are, more consistently political than anything we've heard so far on the record. I try to write to Buddha, and it comes out guns. I vote for peace, and the blood still runs. I want to believe I can pass happy to my child, but the truth gets lost, and the system runs wild. And the chorus goes, send me someone who has doubts about it, who has conquered their own fear and lives to tell about it. Someone who won't give up in the frozen rain, who right next to me through the orchards and the grain. So this was another chorus I found quite memorable melodically. That lyric about the orchard and the grain, I don't know, it struck me as very specific, but I don't know, maybe if you're living a rural life, you walk through orchards and grain fields all the time, and it doesn't mean anything particular. But for some reason, that lyrical combination stuck with me. Track 10, Morning Falling. This one has more... It's more of a mysterious feel than a melancholy feel, but still a kind of feel that stems from a minor key. It has prominent strings in it, and it sounds like Crosby telling a cryptic story, perhaps speaking to some political cynicism. They came that day, empty men, agents of God, they'll never know. His eyes can see, but his mind can't hold what he has seen, the absence of the lives that used to live. And then track 11 is Find a Heart. So this one offers some slight optimism at the end of an album layered with a lot of depression. It's mostly in the lyrics, though. It's not the sound. The sound's still kind of melancholy, but it does bring in some howling saxophone and emphatic drums, so we get that. So overall, this album is an excellent example of craftsmanship. You can tell there's some intricate rhythms, that a lot of thought was put into the lyrics. Sometimes one criticizes an album because it feels like it is filler on it, like they forced it to be complete. This case, I don't think that's the problem. The songs were all meticulously made, but it feels like they were perhaps all made when Crosby and James Raymond were in one musical headspace. And while it's great when an album has a theme, it's great that it's not just a collection of songs. It's great that there's coherence to it. I'd say the only weakness with this one is perhaps there's a bit too much coherence. I'd like to see here, a bit of happiness, a bit more upbeat, a bit more major key thrown in there. Not because there's anything wrong with melancholy or minor, but you want to sort of show range over the course of a story. You want to accent what's great about your melancholy stuff by occasionally deviating from it and letting it resonate when it comes back. But overall, it was very interesting to listen to the kind of music that David Crosby is up to, and I really have to dig more into CSN and CSNY. I've only really passively listened to that, even though I have the American Dream record up there. But yeah, looking forward to listening to more albums going forward. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.